Hello, this is Georgina Rose, and welcome to the Darling YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss everything related to magic, mysticism, the occult, and everything on the fringe of esoterica. And in this video, we're actually going to be doing a new series. This is a series I've been thinking about for a while, and I think I'm ready to launch, and that is next level magic. So I've made so many videos about beginner stuff. I have an Occult 101 playlist that is, I think, literally like 8 or 9 hours long. And I thought it would be useful to fill in a bit of a gap because I've been discussing this gap in esoteric literature between, beginner stuff and far more advanced stuff. So this series is going to be teaching you how to go from that beginner to the advanced and introduce more advanced metaphysical concepts to you to utilize in your magical practice. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So in this video, we're going to be discussing what I have titled Advanced Planetary Magic. So if you are unfamiliar with planetary magic, I highly recommend you go to my channel. I made a video about a year ago called What is Planetary Magic Occult 101, and that's a great place to start. But if you don't want to watch that video, I'll be very quick. Planetary magic is magic utilizing the planetary bodies in ritual practice, right? To make magic happen. It is not the same thing as astrology. Astrology is using the planet's movements and placements to gain information about divination, current events, all these things. Not all astrology is predictive. But this is about practical magic from these ideas. Now, I do think it's very important to have at least like a base understanding of astrology before getting into this. And so the first thing you need to do to go from someone who's just putting their rituals on the planetary day of the week to someone who understands ideas like lunar mansions, utilizing transits, all things that I'll explain in this video, is to understand the type of astrology that you need to planetary time. And for that, you need to realize you do not need to learn predictive astrology, you do not need to learn horary astrology, none of that, though those are great skills to pick up. You basically need to have an understanding of what all the planets mean, what major transit terms mean, like oppositions, squares, sextiles, conjunctions, all these terms, know what a retrograde is, and know that things go a little deeper than that. And the big thing that you need to know for more advanced planetary magic is one concept, and that is degrees. So degrees are basically smaller breakdowns within a sign that can be made to astrology. If you get your natal chart done properly, it'll say that you are a Cancer, and then it will have a degree after that. And these degrees are so vital for all the timing techniques that I'm going to discuss moving forward. Now, to understand how you fit in planetary magic, you do need to have a bit of an understanding of your personal natal chart. You can compute them online and then look up meanings if you want, or use books, or pay an astrologer to give you this information. But it's very important you have a copy of your natal chart, because what is going on in your natal chart is always going to interact with the transits and specific astrological movements that we are basing our rituals around and timing on. So understanding how you relate to these things is good. Like, is your Mars in fall? Do you have Mercury in deficit? All of these things are really going to factor into how you personally relate to planetary magic, because of course you can use any transit you want, but certain ones will have an extra kick for you that can be really helpful to know. So when we talk about our relationship, I think it's very important to understand that within us we have a planetary composition, right? Our natal chart is sort of a guide to our life, right? And within that life, you're going to notice you might have, like, I have a stellium in Gemini. That's an air sign. And so my astrological chart is air heavy. And that leads to imbalances in water, earth, fire, all these things that I don't have as much in. And so when I'm going to approach planetary magic, I think it would be very helpful for me or someone with my, specific chart makeup to work with something related to fire, to do magic during a fire sign, to work with Mars, something like that, right? You have to balance yourself out. Humeric medicine is a outdated medical technique, but on a spiritual level, it is incredibly true. And I've said this so many times. Think about it as you are composed of humors that you have to balance out. Actually, the Hindu system of Ayurvedic medicine is very heavily based around this. I think that that's really good to look at to get kind of ideas of what I'm talking about. But what you have lack of, you should be seeking out and engaging with metaphysically, because if you get thrown off balance, that can cause you problems. And if you are immediately thrown off balance, I highly recommend this very simple ritual. You probably already know it, the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram. So that ritual actually can neutralize planetary energies and give you a fresh start. So if astrology is really kicking your butt, or you feel like you're entirely lunar or entirely martial, do the LBRH. It will really bring you back to center and bring you back to a good starting point to move on from. So the first advanced planetary magic technique that I want to discuss is utilizing the lunar mansions. Now, the lunar mansions are a non-Western form of planetary magic. They come from the Near East, generally, and some from the Far East. There's actually two different planetary lunar mansion like systems to look at. There is the Arabic system and there is the Vedic Indian system, and they actually have a different number of lunar mansions. I am far more familiar with the Arabic lunar mansions. I learned them from the Shams al-Ma'arif, which is a Islamicate grimoire. Most people think about the Shams al-Ma'arif in the context of jinn magic, and that is what I've talked about it a lot, but it actually contains a high amount of planetary magic in it. And in the Shams al-Ma'arif, it breaks down all 27 lunar mansions to the exact degree, and then with that you are able to do specific workings, and by understanding like what each mansion means, you understand what's beneficial, right? There are some mansions that are considered unfavorable, right? Ones that you would only want to do curse work on, and there are other mansions that are incredibly benevolent and favorable and, you know, really put you on a good start. And so when you're timing your rituals, you can consider the lunar mansions. You can do traditional rites out of like the Shams al-Ma'arif itself, or you can do any rite you want in correspondence with the specific lunar mansion. The great thing about the lunar mansions is that they do cycle through really quickly because the moon moves fast. So how do you know what lunar mansion you're in? So first, you need to take the list of the lunar mansions. I highly recommend the Shams al-Ma'arif. I wish I could go through all of them like on camera right now, but I simply don't have the time. So get the Shams al-Ma'arif. You can get the English selected translation. It's a shortened version. It actually has all this information in it, so you don't need to get the whole text and worry about translating out of Arabic or Turkish or something. Like, you can get the English version and that'll work. And even if you don't want to work with Shams al-Ma'arif, this text explains the lunar mansions really well, so it's honestly worth getting just for that. I should be sponsored by the press that released the Shams al-Ma'arif because I talk about it so much. I have no connection with them. But if you want to sponsor me, please do. But yeah, you can look at that, and what you're gonna do is to find out which one to use each day is to look at the sign of the moon and what degree it is in. So the way that I calculate this is I go on like one of those like astrological chart computation websites like AstroSeek or Astro-Charts, there's a ton of them, and I just type in like the exact time or the exact time I want to do my ritual, and it'll tell me, and I'll look at the wheel. You gotta look at the wheel. You'll see the moon glyph, right? It looks like a little crescent moon, and it'll have the degree right there. And with that degree, you'll know, okay, so that's the degree of the moon. And then with that degree, you remember that, and you look through the lunar mansions, and you flip to, oh, what does this degree mean? And actually, sometimes I've actually pushed off rituals by a day or two because I've been like, well, the moon phase is right, but obviously moon phases last like 3 days, and today's lunar mansion is really, really rough. I don't want to have that energy going in there, because whether you're conscious or not, all of these things impact your rites. So I think it's really valuable to consider the lunar mansions and become familiar with them. You don't need to do specific crazy rituals about them, but I think at least having some awareness will make a big difference. I really do find it a powerful timing system, and that gets into degrees as a whole. So there are specific astrological degrees that have specific meanings to them and can be worked with in a specific way. One that I think of immediately, because it's the one that it just comes to my brain the fastest, is 17 degrees Scorpio. And this is called the accursed degree in Arabic astrology. And this is like the most unfavorable degree ever. It's super malefic. And so if you had something really malefic you needed to do, you would pick that degree, and so on and so on. Every single degree has a meaning. There's some degrees that people pop out as like more important or more discussed than others. Like there's some that people just kind of care about more, and that'll be the ones that are either really positive or really negative, but all degrees have meaning. And actually, one thing that makes certain degrees a little special is if you consider fixed stars. So when we're talking about planetary magic, we are talking about the movements of the heavenly bodies, right? The planets themselves. And the planets, when we get these signs like Capricorn, Libra, they're actually names of constellations. And so we're talking about the planetary movement in relation to the constellation. And within every constellation, there are a bunch of stars, and those stars all have meanings. In fact, constellation magic could be a whole subject unto itself. It's worked with very similarly to planetary magic, it's just discussed a lot less. And there are specific stars within constellations called fixed stars. And these fixed stars have a very specific meaning. And if you time a ritual according to a fixed star, that can be very, very powerful. Now, there are also people who invoke specific fixed stars, right? They attach specific spirits and correspondences, or they invoke the star themselves, because as we know, all things have a spiritual energy to them. If you can invoke the planets, you can invoke stars. So fixed stars are a whole paradigm unto themselves, and being aware of the major ones I think is valuable, because not every single degree is a fixed star, right? There's a limited number of fixed stars, right? So I think it can be good if you're curious about fixed stars to just look at your birth chart, look at the degrees of what you have, and then just read through like list of fixed stars. You'll see all the degrees, you'll see their meaning, and then you'll go, oh. And then once you have a bit of an understanding of them, look out for them in the coming sky and go, wait, that fixed star is coming up, I should do a working in accordance to that fixed star. As well, each fixed star is favorable with certain planetary bodies and unfavorable with others, right? There's some that are more favorable with Mercury, some with Jupiter, so you can really get very technical with it and specific with what you want to do with your fixed stars. Now, the next form of advanced planetary magic that I want to discuss is a polarizing topic, and one that will continue to be discussed until the world ends in its fiery explosion. And that would be utilizing eclipses in a magical practice. So eclipses are very intense events, right? They happen about twice a year in two signs typically, right? They happen in, obviously they come in pairs, right? A lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse, they're like back to back. They're within 2 weeks of each other. And then about 6 months later, there's another eclipse. And these eclipses are hard, malefic, difficult events that sort of set the tone for the next 6 months of your life, right? They're kind of beginnings and endings of chapters. And eclipses are not beginner things. I've always said don't do eclipse magic if you don't know what you're doing. And I stand by that. But if you are ready, the eclipses can be used in incredibly powerful ways. They are intense, cathartic, dark transits. They are malefic, they are heavy, and sometimes we need to engage with that energy in our practices, right? If there's something that needs to sharply end in your life, an eclipse is the perfect time to utilize that. Or if someone has been abusing you or mistreating you, this is the time to get your Saturnine karmic retribution. Now, the other thing about eclipse magic that I think is really important to bring up is each eclipse happens differently in each person's chart. So when there is an eclipse, I think it's really good to look at like, okay, let's say it's a lunar eclipse in Gemini. I just made that up. I don't know if that's an upcoming eclipse. So lunar eclipse in Gemini, you're going to look at, where is Gemini on your chart, specifically in what house is Gemini, and what that house is going to be what that relates to in your life. Like maybe it's in the house of family, right? So you're going to have an intense ending in family. And since it's lunar, it's going to be very emotional and internal and kind of difficult, right? And so knowing that, you can go into your eclipse ritual being like, well, I don't want everything with my family to end. I don't want to be disowned, but I do want, a specific conflict I've been dealing with in my family to be resolved. And you could use that in a ritual. Now, the next thing about eclipse magic is I think it is a difficult idea to invoke the moon or the sun when they are being eclipsed upon. I have seen some people do this and I hate it, because essentially what's happening during an eclipse is the sun is being blocked. That's why we don't see it. Or the moon is being blocked. That's why we don't see it. And so to interact with the moon or the sun on these days doesn't really make sense because their energies are blocked. And any ritual you do with that is going to have a weird energy to it and not a productive one. So I don't suggest working like that on an eclipse. Instead, what I would suggest is if there's something you want to end on a lunar eclipse, to invoke, say, Hecate or Mars or Inanna Ishtar or Alat or someone like that. I think that's a much better approach. Now, all of this so far has been very ceremonial magic-centric, dramatic ritual-centric, because that's fundamentally the bulk of my practice, but that's not the only way you can use planetary magic. You don't need to be a ritualist. Now, the first way that you can utilize planetary magic is through magia naturalis. So magia naturalis is an old term for natural magic that refers to magic of the natural world. Now, technically all planetary magic is magia naturalis because astrology is considered a natural science and the planets themselves are natural bodies. So technically all of this is magia naturalis. But I think when most people think of magia naturalis, they're thinking of like folk practices. They're thinking of using herbs, using plants, and that can be used so well with more advanced planetary magic techniques. So if you are, say, making like a blue lotus wine, right? You want to make a blue lotus wine to use entheogenically in a ritual in the future. So when are you going to start that? You could start that on a Venus day, or you could start that when, there's a really good conjunction or something has left retrograde, right? Because whatever day you start your herbal practices on is going to infuse into them and affect them. I've also seen people make specific oils or waters depending on the transit. Like, let's say there's a really difficult thing with Chiron, which is a kind of, it's an asteroid. It relates to a lot of trauma, deep wounds. And so if there's a specific like Chiron transit going on, you can start an oil with corresponding herbs in it and start it on that day and then finish and strain it when that transit has completed. Or if you are going into a Mercury retrograde, you could make a specific like tisane that you will make into tea the day before the retrograde, or honestly, day before is a bad idea because that'll still be in shadow, but the day before the shadow of the retrograde, so that you can have that like renewed good Mercury energy throughout the retrograde. Now, the next way to utilize planetary energies outside of a ceremonial magic context is through astrological or planetary remediation. So this is a technique that astrologers discuss more than magicians, but I actually think falls firmly in the category of magic. And that is noting your relationship to each planet and doing activities, acts, rituals, offerings to heal that. So let's say you have a really bad Saturn placement in your chart, right? Your relationship with Saturn is bad. Every Saturn transit just kicks your butt, it wipes you out, it makes you feel horrible. So how can you remediate that? So as I explained earlier, there is a humoric medicine type relationship with the planets. So what you would do is you would do activities or things that relate to basically the rulerships of Saturn. Discipline, boundaries, rules, all these things. You could say, make a calendar. I mean, that's very Saturnian, right? Planning. You could, do something disciplined, like do something hard that you don't want to do, clean your whole apartment and really spend a lot of time on the floorboards, or, assert discipline in your life in some way, right? Like cut out someone who's been mistreating you, or, stand up to someone you love who you need to have a hard conversation with for their benefit, right? That would be a Saturnine act and would thus remediate you. Now, if you are going through a retrograde, remediation is amazing. You can pray the Orphic hymn to the specific planet, or say, with Mars, I always suggest working out, doing some weightlifting, right? That's very martial, and that's going to remediate that very, very quickly. You can do this with every single planet. For Mercury, you could write something, write poetry, send some emails. For the moon, you could, tap into your emotions. You could go swimming. All these things. You can get really creative with it. There's really no rules because it's just about doing things that relate to that. And in a way, like, it's not ritualistic. It's not, what we think of when we think of magic, but it is using your will to enact change, and it is connecting to the divine above you. And it is a legitimate and powerful practice. Every retrograde, the Orphic hymns is what gets me through it, especially the Mercury ones, because those have been kicking my butt lately. My patrons will know this because I've had video issues during them. And ever since praying like the Orphic hymn to Mercury every single day of a retrograde, retrogrades have been a little bit less bad for me, but of course, you can't avoid the whole retrograde. It's still gonna get you sometimes. You're still gonna have to deal with it, just not as much. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in relation to advanced planetary magic is something that isn't gonna be a thing in older grimoires. It isn't gonna be a thing in older texts. It's not traditional, but it is a thing now, so I still think it's worth discussing. It's not something I engage with, but it is a thing for people. And that would be working with the outer planets, or the planets outside of Saturn that we discovered later. So at this point in time, we do have correspondences for Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. We know what they represent. We know where they stand metaphysically. We have Greek correspondences to them, so you can look at the Greek god. Like, we know what they mean. They are worked with less because it's just less traditional. And the ancients didn't know they were there. So you don't really need to work with them to have an effective practice, which is why I generally don't. But it is still an option, and you can do all the things you would do with every other planet with the outer planets. You're gonna see less discussion about it, like way less, but it is a real practice that you can do. So my final advice for people interested in this stuff is to go deeper, right? You need to understand these terms before you do this. You need to do research before you do this, right? You need to know what it is, right? You can't just look and go, okay, well, this transit, it's in opposition, so that means malefic, right? It's not what every opposition means. You need to know what the specific transit you're working with means, and most importantly, how it relates to you, or if you are doing magic on behalf of someone else, how it relates to them. I think in general, if you're gonna do planetary magic for another person to heal them or something, like, you need to know their chart. I think without their chart, you're gonna really struggle, and that's gonna cause you problems. Planetary magic as a whole is a very flexible discipline, and it refers to so many different things, like there's so much under this category that I think sometimes people, simplify it down and underestimate the beauty and complexity of the paradigm. So I hope this takes you to the next level. I think I'm gonna make more videos like these. Let me know if you want more videos like these. And if this went over your head, make sure you check out my channel and watch my earlier Occult 101 Planetary Magic video. It'll give you the basic language that will make this video make so much more sense. So I've been Georgina Rose. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you subscribe for 93 days, you'll meet your holy guardian angel, and you won't need to know what a planet is ever again. If you want to support me, you can join my Patreon. You get a bonus video every month, a ritual guide that I write every month, and this month's ritual guide is packed full of these techniques. I thought it'd be good to put stuff in the ritual guide that goes along with the videos I'm planning this month. I thought that made sense, and I think I'm going to keep doing that. And if you're a high enough tier, you can do like basically a mentorship with me where you meet with me once a month and I give you spiritual advice. It's really fun. And I love talking with you guys. So thank you so much. And I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm on every social media platform. So just look below and you'll see all the links. Bye.